in the categorization of metta bhavana being a samadhi practice, because it's gathering the factor for loving kindness.
Right, exactly. Which is nothing more than, in the other way of saying it, is gladdening the mind or becoming satisfied. So we can look at it in this, in the aspect of step 10 of gladdening the mind, or we can look at it at point number 6 of satisfaction. And so being really satisfied means that we can be at peace. But we can't be at peace if we're a loser. So we have to have the right attitude. And the right attitude is a winner, or I can do this. And it also, that means then that we have piti. The piti is the exhilaration, in a way, of knowing that we can do this, that we're successful at it. And so by gathering these factors together, piti, sukha, gladdening the mind, taking deep breaths, and whatnot like that. And the number one is the removal of the hindrance, because the sukha, or the pleasure, or the satisfaction, does not arise when the mind is hindered. And in fact, the whole point of calling them hindrances is because they hinder us from being in a state of joy, satisfaction, peacefulness. Okay. And so the dichotomy between uh, vipassana as a practice and samatha as a practice is kind of a false one, because they're basically two sides of the same coin. You can't really see what's going on until you're at peace. And so if you're at peace, then you can see basically what's going on. An example of that is a shaky camera. If and we can see it in many ways. Sometimes, when it's a telephoto lens or whatever, you need the camera on a tripod to give it steadiness. Holding it with your hand is not going to give you anything but a blurred image if you got really high speed film, or you're doing it with a telephoto. But also with a cell phone, let us say somebody is uh, doing a cell phone video of a tornado, and all of a sudden a tornado comes right at them. What happens? They forget
It's,
they try to save their life. They pay attention now more to the tornado than they do their cell phone, which means now, just when it's the right time to see really what the tornado was going to do, you can't see it, because the guy who's got the phone has lost his phone and is falling in through the air, or maybe is whirling around in the sky. But you've got, when the cell phone is not stable, it presents you with no clear image. This is exactly what we're talking about with the hindrances. Why do hindrance hinder us? Is because the mind becomes shaky, it's not focused, um, etc. So gathering the jhana factors together, of piti, sukha, born of the seclusion from the hindrances, coupled with having the mind that's fit for work by doing good breathing, those now are the jhana factors that come to gather the mind together so that the mind is fit for work, which means that now you can apply the mind to that which you want to and sustain it there. And in this regard, what we mean by that is, instead of having those thoughts in the background, just letting them go, we're going to start paying close attention to what they're doing, because we're not going to allow unwholesome thoughts come in. We want to maintain the state that we're in. So the way that we choose what thoughts are wholesome and which thoughts are not wholesome is the kind of thoughts that I have that will take me out of this state are unwholesome thoughts. And the thoughts that keep me in this state are then wholesome thoughts. And this is the way that we begin to uh, control the mind, by not allowing unwholesome thoughts in. Or if we allowed a thought in and then it gets rambunctious, then we throw it out. So The example that I would use, maybe I've told you about this one before, is the example of a bouncer at the bar.
Let me think.
The bouncer of the bar has two jobs. First job that he has is to stand at the door and decide who he's going to let in. Maybe their name's on his list, or maybe they're dressed well enough. If
This
they're
is
not
a modernization of the castle guard.
yes, exactly. Precisely so. And along with that, then if someone is now let into the bar or into the castle and they start misbehaving, then the castle guards are going to get him in the castle and throw him out of the castle. The bouncer, if someone is starting a fight or misbehaving in the bar, he will leave the door, go into the bar, grab that guy, and throw him out.
The mindfulness of the samadhi object.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So this is how we begin to work with our thoughts, is the thoughts that are going to keep me or take me out of the state of satisfaction. And you can do that while you're laying in bed at night. That the things that you could do to prepare for bed, or prepare for sleep, rather, after you're in the bed, would be continuing to monitor the thoughts, but allow in only the kind of thoughts that are relaxing, pleasing, conducive to going to sleep, and not allow in the kinds of thoughts that people worry over when they can't sleep. And so remembering to take a deep, long, relaxing breath over and over again while we're laying in bed, and guarding the mind to allow only the kinds of thoughts that you could go so far as to say that you're only going to allow the kinds of thoughts to come into the mind while you're about to go to sleep that you're willing to entertain while you are asleep. Going back to that point about burning it by day and smoldering by night, that generally the kinds of things that people think about when they're dreaming have to do with the kinds of things that's been happening all day for them. So that when meditators then wind up not dreaming very much, or not remembering the dreams because the dreams were never at a level to be important, that the dreams don't become a distraction. And so another technique would be to have the intention as you're going to sleep to not allow any dreams there, that you're going to wake yourself up if you catch yourself dreaming.
That sounds tricky. Yeah, I usually wake out of a dream before I wake up in the morning.
Well, that's another one then about getting up in the morning, is to allow yourself time. That many people, probably the best example is Mr. Bean, that oversleeps, and then when he does wake up, now he's in a panic. Okay, so if we wake up, if we plan on waking up so that we've got plenty of time in bed, 5-10 minutes or so, we can now practice Anapanasati to get deep breath, to get ready for the day. My, what a marvelous day is this. Wow, I'm going to be able to do everything that feels good today. And so we begin to plan on having a really good moment, really good day when we wake up. Start off breathing well. So that's the first thing we do, even before we get out of bed. When we wake up, the first thing is check. I know I'm awake. What posture am I in? How's the breathing been? Let's start breathing well right now. Okay, so this is the thing to do after you wake up. So basically, after you wake up, it's the same thing that we're going to do when we're going to sleep, which is basically what we're planning on, and let us say developing as a skill to do this throughout the day, so that the breath is there with us, and we remember often to take deep breath. So this is the practice that we're shooting for all the time, to be in the here now. The same thing would actually be true while we're eating, that there are techniques that we can use. An example of that is when you put a morsel in the mouth, the thing to do now is to put the utensils down. Normally we play with the food, with our utensils, getting it ready, stirring it up, looking at it, playing with it or whatnot. But now we're very visual and hand oriented. We should put the utensils down, put the hands down, and pay close attention to what's happening inside the mouth.
When I seriously started doing that at home, it was the first time I ever noticed the automatic moving of the tongue to distribute the foods around the teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting. It just happens so naturally, so easily, almost perfectly. Well, I don't bite my tongue as much as I used to when I was a teenager, for example. But yeah, it's very interesting just to see that happening as it's happening.
Mm-hmm. And so this is then when we understand the 4 postures, and we understand mindfulness of eating, and we understand about the sleep and sleep states. An example, by the way, is that in many religions and traditions, the dreams are important. One example of that is Jacob's ladder. Another one is riding a winged horse out of Jerusalem into heaven. That was the dream that Muhammad had. Another one is the 7 lean cattle and the 7 fat cattle, etc., like that. You know that story.
I do not.
That's one that Jacob said to that one of the important people in the Pharaoh's government had a dream that nobody could interpret. But Joseph interpreted it, and they liked that, and so he became a minister in the government because he was able to interpret dreams. So dream interpretation is old thing that's been around for a long time that people still are curious about. What do you think the Buddha would do about dream interpretation?
Probably say it's conditioned.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's
Not
about
self.
it. He would say, yeah, forget about it. Yeah. So you had a dream. So what?
Yeah.
That just means that you weren't watching what you were doing while you were asleep. They have the same attitude about it when the student will come and say, I had a past life experience, which may have not been before, during, or after meditation, or waking up out of a dream or whatever. The students will interpret dreamlike states as a past life experience. In India, the gurus want to know all about it. In Thailand, you tell a Buddhist teacher that you had an out-of-body or not an out-of-body, let us say a past life experience, and he'll say, never mind. Let's go back and start again. That these experiences don't mean anything.
Unless you give them.
Unless you give them meaning, right. But all the meaning that they do have is the meaning that you're about to give them. Other than that, they have no meaning. And then we begin to understand, wait a minute, our whole life is like that. That really there is no meaning to much of anything. There's just the thusness or the isness. In other words, the fact that the palm trees out here are green, there's a scientific reason for it, but it doesn't mean anything. It's green simply because it's got broad spectrum, and the eyes are such that the broad spectrum is right in the middle, so they appear green. But if you look closely, you'll recognize, wait a minute, there's not just one green, there's tens of thousands or even millions of greens. And what about the greens that kind of change to yellow? So it's green on this side and yellow on that, but in between, I'm not sure what it is. Okay. Part of that has to do with the fact that humans try to invent names for colors rather than see that colors are quite fluid. So there's no
It's the same
meaning
with
in it.
most things, or
Mhm.
maybe all things.
And so this is why mindfulness is useful, to be able to remember to look carefully at what's going on rather than assume that we already know. Because we've already decided on what the meaning was, when in fact, no, there's no meaning in anything. That quality of meaning then leads me to remember a conversation that I had with one of my good friends here. His name is Tun. He's Estonian, and he's been living here at Wat Suan Mok for quite a number of years.
He's a what? Sorry, like a mason or something?
Estonia is a country in northern
Oh,
Europe.
Estonian. Sorry, my mistake. I didn't hear you properly.
Yes, he's Estonian. The point was in a question about the Pali word sunyata, and that I said that sunyata means things are empty, including empty of meaning, and he challenged me on that. And so we both did a literature research and came to the conclusion that the word meaning and all that we have associated with that doesn't appear anywhere in the Pali, almost as if the concept of things having a meaning didn't even occur to the people in the time of the Buddha, that's very much a Christian thing based upon meaning because of God.
Do you want to talk about etymology for a second?
Sure.
Meaning, mean as an average, and mean as a way of comparing things, to put things into one single category, despite the fact it might not be in that category. And meaning then is just very similar to making something which is not, in a sense.
Okay.
Or comparing, relative to something else.
Right. In that regard, using it mathematically, that almost meaning has the ability of equality, or if it means X, that means it is equivalent to or is X. Now, going back to the long conversation that took weeks over Skype to have with Tun about this, that what the Buddha does say is that everything is empty of self, in the sense of, when we mean the word self here, we mean a core or an isness about it. An example of that is the value of gold. What is the value of gold?
What we make of it.
Precisely. That gold does have attributes. It has a certain color. It has a certain melting point. It has a certain malleability to it. And so people can make trinkets and things out of it. But we can make trinkets out of wood, but wood doesn't last. So gold has certain qualities to it. And one of them is that it doesn't rust or rot away by itself. But that's no reason for us to have hoarded gold for centuries, nor is it actually an indication of wealth, unless humans make it mean that. So gold does not mean wealth. Gold does not mean value. That meaning has been added to it by humans, because humans like gold. All right. But there is no inherent goldness, in the sense of, oh, he's golden, or the golden rule. Rules are not golden. So we can use. So what we're doing is we're putting meaning onto something that does not inherently belong there. So going back into that core or that isness or that self, that when that's in fact part of the teachings about the five aggregates, that the body is merely a body, but there's no inherent you-ness in that body.
Well, the body's just the elements, right?
Just the elements, precisely. That there is no you in feelings. And yet people will say, well, I feel like that. Or this is how I feel. No, those feelings is not you, is not how you feel, because in a way, almost all feeling is done kind of automatically out of the instinctual system. So we feel instinctually, and that I am not the feelings that come up. But what we're actually looking at is that, in fact, how could it be? Because for almost every human, both before and currently, and perhaps right into the future, people feel things that they don't want to feel. They don't want to feel like that, but they feel that way anyway. For instance, is anger. Very few people actually want to feel angry. It's a feeling that we have that is not us. And yet we mistake it in the sense of, I'm angry. That's not possible. There is anger, but I am not the anger. Because if I were the anger, it wouldn't be anger. It would be a big jolly grin instead. So we're out of control of our feelings. We're out of control with the mind. So this is what the whole quality of the five aggregates is all about, is that it's not self. Now we look at the Dhammapada, and there is that phrase there that says, Sabbe Sankara Anicca. Sabbe Sankara Dukkha. And Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. And why that change from Sankara to Dhamma when we're moving from Anicca, Dukkha to Anatta? The fact is that almost everything that we know is a Sankara in the sense that it's a compound or put together. Even the elements that we know of now were not really elemental. An example is the atom. Whatever an atom is, was given the name of atom because the word atom comes from the Greek, which means atom, or not cuttable. It's not divisible, right? But now we know that that's not true. Atoms are not atoms. Why? Because they have, first off, electron fields around a nucleus.
That's a hell of a quote. Atoms are not atoms.
Who said that?
You.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Okay. It depends upon the definition of the word atom. Okay,
Atoms.
so when we're talking about atoms in the sense of classical physics, is not atom in the sense of not cuttable.
Yeah.
So atoms are not atoms because they can be cut. So atomic particles are not atomic because they can be. And in fact, the nucleus itself can be broken down into protons and neutrons. And then the protons and the neutrons can be broken down into quarks, depending upon an up quark or down.
Funny thing I'll link with the quark was derived from James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, which I'm a big fan of.
Really?
Yeah, it was a quote. I think it was 5 quarks for Master Mark or something like that. It was just a bit of nonsense, and it was a nonsense words, but the physicist who discovered the quark really liked that name.
Mm-hmm. But what we're looking at is that, in fact, perhaps quarks are the most elemental of particles, because it's the quark that has the actual energy change from a particle into energy. But back to the point that the Buddha was making is that everything except for the kind of quarks which are out of our experience altogether is actually a sankara. And all things that are put together
Oh,
or stuck together
yeah.
are molecular rather
Ah,
than
okay.
atomic.
Okay.
Anything sankara are compounded things
Yeah.
are subject to falling back
Mm.
apart.
So
Anything,
there is not that call, that single thing. It's always compounds. Turtles all the way down.
right, turtles
Yeah.
all the way down is a way of putting it. Exactly so. All right. And so, because things are inherently unstable, that means that from a perspective of stability, everything is unsatisfactory because nothing is permanent. Nothing is, in fact, possible to be perfect because one of the qualities of perfection is that it remains perfect. If things are perfect only for a short time, then the fact that they are changeable robs them of their perfection. And the fact, the closest thing that humans have to perfection is gold, because it
It's quite
doesn't
absurd.
deteriorate quite so easily, and yet it still can be robbed. You can still lose it on the stock market. In fact, most of the people who own gold in the United States have never seen their gold, so how do they know they've got any? To where in Thailand, you know that the people in Thailand, when they buy gold, they walk out of the gold store with real gold in their hand. But Americans, when they buy gold, they don't get it. They may, in fact, have to pay a fee to the bank to keep their gold, but they can't walk into the vault and see which gold is my gold. And so that's a very interesting gold market that we have, that where they sell gold. And sometimes these marketeers will sell the same gold 10, 50, 75, 100 times
Mm.
because the people keep uh, hoarding their gold and not selling it, to where the gold market in Thailand is a real market, because that gold, when somebody buys it, does not stay with the gold dealer. It goes into the hands of the buyer. And then they know it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to own a bar of gold. And when I say a bar of gold, I'm talking about maybe 10 baht, 200,000 baht of Thai baht will get you approximately 10 baht of gold. But that's dangerous. People in India would hold gold too, and so putting gold into the form of a necklace, and then the woman wears the necklace in public, is extremely dangerous. That women have lost those necklaces. One example is the train is about to pull off. There she is sitting beside the window of the train car with the window open, and all of a sudden there's a hand that comes in, grabs that necklace, and she's on the train, and he's gone. That's very common in India, so that people should not be wearing their gold because it's dangerous. Okay. Now, here's what we mean by that. That means that everything is temporary in that regard. Even though the gold itself may not rot, who owns that gold or where that gold stays changes. So even gold in that regard is still a sankara,
I
because
didn't. Yeah, I didn't think of impermanence as like a 3D vector space. All constantly moving. Yeah, I didn't think of
everything,
it like that. Yeah.
yeah, and so everything is unsatisfactory because everything's in turmoil.
Or coordinates. More like.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But there's another kind, and that is when we say sabai dhamma anatta. That sabai dhamma means now we're talking about not just the compounded things, but we're talking about other things too. Well, what other things then can, if we've gotten all the way down to quarks, which don't naturally occur in nature, then what are we talking about then?
Is it saying not your enlightenment?
Okay, all right. What we're actually looking at is that there are some things that are noble in the sense that they do last for a long, long time. An example of that would be the noble elements like argon. Argon is a noble gas because it will not interact with other gases. This is why argon is normally used in incandescent light bulbs, is because you need an atmosphere in there that will not be affected by the hot filament. So you cannot put nitrogen in there. Nitrogen will interact under heat, but argon does not. That's why argon gas is put into the those filaments. So what we mean now by noble are things that don't change. This is why we can call the Noble Eightfold Path and Four Noble Truths, is because they were true, completely true, and have not changed since the time of the Buddha. Long before the Buddha and long after we're dead, there will still be these noble truths, that there is suffering, and there's a reason for it. Okay? So that's what gives it the quality of noble. Here's something else that's Dhamma in that regard, and that is the number one. And the number one. And 1 + 1 is 2. That's been always the case. Whether humans knew it or not, it's always been the case. So mathematics is another quality that that is noble, or that it is timeless. So it's a Dhamma, not a Sankara.
Sorry, I read because I read something from Mahasi, and to be honest, I didn't want to go through my books and find it again, because it's quite heavy reading. But yeah, really tiring to read through some of that stuff, even though it's really profound, you know. But I think he was mentioning that math and logic and concepts. Sorry, just math, numbers, and 1 + 1 = 2, and all that is still conceptual, and not ultimate reality.
Actually, we conceptualize about it, but the concepts that we have about it, and I'm speaking in concepts, and so those are concepts, and concepts are Sankara. But what I'm talking about is that there are things that can be relied upon, and we do rely upon mathematics, that it's always there. Now, the way that we use mathematics is through concepts, but we're pointing to something that's actually very noble, it's very real. And yet, even mathematics, or even profound truths that are true always, including, I can go for gravity. Okay, gravity is noble in the sense that it does not make choices about who falls when they trip. Everybody falls. Anything that gravity can do, it will do. Another way of saying it is that gravity is omniscient, because it always knows, it's always there. It's wait a minute, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. Right. It's there all over the world. In fact, all throughout the universe, there is no place that gravity doesn't exist. So it's omnipresent. Okay. It's all powerful in the sense that it takes an awful lot of work to defeat gravity, and you have to defeat it. You cannot say that I won, because as soon as you do and stop working against it, it'll grab you and pull you right back in.
I thought of that the other day. I was thinking, you know, if you were to completely relax, you'd probably just, you know, injure yourself. You know, yeah.
Okay. So in that regard, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, those things that they qualify as God, gravity has that. But there is a deeper thing than even gravity, and that is, and the physicists are beginning to understand it, is that there is a law of conditionality, which is exactly the law that the Buddha used so much, and that is cause and effect. Or with this, there is that. Without this, there is not that. The whole quality of paticca samuppada is based upon this causes that, which then causes this, which then causes that in a sequence of events. So causality is actually necessary. And here's the way: the causality of the temperature of the energy that we have will determine the quarks, and will determine then the molecules, will determine things that weigh. And once that's there, when you have a certain amount of mass, then you're going to have gravity. You could even go so far as to say that the weak nuclear force is merely a kind of gravity, and that the strong nuclear force is even a different kind of gravity. But what is the strong nuclear force? Is that which keeps protons collected together, when we know that protons want to separate from each other because of electromagnetic. We have the North Pole and the South Pole, and two North Poles hate each other. So how or what is it that will keep two protons together, or in case of uranium-232, 232 of either protons or neutrons? How does it stay together? The actual answer is there is it's not a thing, but there is something that they call gluon. But there is something that keeps these things together, and that gluon that glues these things together is a form of gravity, even though they want to rebel. So now we're beginning to say, oh, wait a minute now. There's these forces of nature have been there since the time of Big Bang or whatever, and that force is going to remain there throughout. So gravity would be something that would be considered Dhamma, not a Sankara. But there is still no self there. There is no God in gravity. There's no God of gravity.
I don't know. I might be really far off here, but to what extent is it actually there from before it was discovered? I mean, that thing in particular. I mean, its effects and perhaps its mechanics were there, but was it there since it is defined by investigation?
I guess you could go so far as to say that which is in noble, or that which is Dhamma, is there with or without the investigation. So where a Sankara, the investigation of the Sankara will actually change it. And we know that for sure. An example is, bird watching. The birds are going to behave differently when they're being watched. Why? Because they know they're being watched. You think the bird watcher can see all the birds? No, but all the birds can see the bird watcher. Okay, so in that regard, the investigation or the observation actually has an effect upon what's going on. The physicists are really gaga over that one. That thing, like, for instance, is light a wave or is it a particle? It depends upon how you're measuring it. If you measure it like a particle, it's a particle. If you measure it like a wave, it's a wave. But still, photons of light or packets of light are there whether we measure them or not. So in that regard, that whole point then is noble. This is Dhamma, not Sankara. And yet, so you can see then that Sankara is a subset of Dhamma. Okay. The two Dhammas stuck together will make a Sankara, is a way of looking at it. But always, now going back to that phrase, anicca or sabbe, Sankara anicca, sabbe Sankara dukkha, but sabbe Dhamma anatta. What the Buddha is pointing at there is no self or inherentness anywhere. So what that means then in the word of sunyata The word sunyata is actually described quite well as the absence of something, and that we need to learn to practice this in our practice. For instance, if you did have a problem, let us say an obsession of some kind, like an obsession with Coca-Cola or whatever, and then years later you haven't had a Coke, then it's out of thought and out of mind. But we don't even think about it. But if we think about it in sunyata, that would say that, oh, I remember at one time there was Coke, and now there is no Coke. The Buddha worked with Anatta that way, or excuse me, Ananda, when he took him to the sala where the monks eat. You know what a sala is? A house without any walls.
Oh, right, yeah.
And without a floor sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, but there is a roof on poles. So, and every temple has dozens of salas. Salas are all over the place. Okay, so that sala then, where the monks eat, when the monks are not there and there are no bowls, then that means that that sala is empty of monks. It is empty of bowls. It is empty of all of the stuff that comes when the monks come to eat there. Another one would be that the forest is empty of a village. That means that there is no village in the forest. Now we see that with sunyata, sunyata means that everything, every dhamma, every sankhara, everything, no matter what way you look at it or what kind of divisions we have, everything is not self. Now, one of the ways of talking about self is permanence. Nothing is permanent, but we've already covered that with anicca. But nothing is inherently of itself. Everything is changing. Okay, so this whole quality then of anatta, if nothing has a self to it, then that means that nothing has an inherent meaning either. This is an important point. If there's no self, then that means that there is no meaning. There cannot be a meaning if there is no reference point of the self.
Yeah. Sorry, a Bible verse came to mind about 5 minutes ago. And it was something about God's rumination above the waters and looking at his own reflection or something like that. I can't remember where it's from. I tried searching it on Genesis, but I couldn't find anything about it.
I'm not sure about that. Oh, I do know about the face of the waters and it's all good, or something about that. I don't remember exactly.
I think the gist of it is that once God peers into the water and sees the reflection, duality is kind of introduced of self and other, or this and that. So it becomes abstract. Is abstracted even the word? I'm not sure.
That part of the passage I'm not familiar with. I know that in early Genesis, when he's actually doing the creation, that
it might be another part. I'm not that familiar with the Bible.
Neither am I. I only know the really good stuff. Like my favorite is that the kingdom of God is within you. It is not outside. And that would be in that regard then, that because this thing that they're using God, the word God, they're trying to describe something. You could go so far as to say in Buddhism that God is actually the sum total of all Dhamma. And that the word that we would have would be Dhammakai. And so we are living in a sea of Dhamma. And that much of that sea is in fact Sankara, but some of that sea is inherently unchanging, or so it's only the Sankara that changes.
That's the unborn koan of Zen. What is unborn? Yeah.
Okay. So in that way, then we say that since all of the five aggregates, and in fact everything, has no self to it, then that means that there is no meaning to anything, because everything is either something stuck together or something else stuck together. But basically everything then is Sankara plus a few things that are real Dhamma, which would be then the, let's call it the mathematical underpinning of the way that the physical universe operates. There are unchanging laws. And the physicists are... well, no, what I was getting at unchanging laws is the way that things operate. And the physicists haven't figured everything else out yet, but they figured out quite a lot of stuff. And what we do know that the physicists have figured out, like gravity, there is no self in gravity. There's no unitary self. It's just a property of the attraction that mass creates. And so basically we're looking at, without even talking about it, we're going way deep into physics in the sense of what is a unified field theory? There's got to be one. But in fact, Freud nearly drove himself crazy over trying to figure out what was a unified field theory, that all we have is 4 fields, not one. We haven't figured it out yet. But we do know that it's there, and when they do figure it out, we will also know that even that has no self. That God is not the unified field theory, because everything is much bigger than that, but it's based upon that. They, in fact, are looking at the only time that the unified field theory was, in fact, in force was before the quarks. Because quarks required a lot of cooling off. And so in this way, I like to mix physics with Dhamma, because they fit in really close together. That physics proves that there is no self. Physics actually proves that there is no God the way that the Christians think of God. They've done it in several ways. One is with the telescopes. There's no cloud up there someplace. It's got an old man with a beard sitting in an ivory chair. That's an old Greek myth, and they called him Zeus. There is no Zeus in the sky.
I forgot how much interplay there is there. Yeah.
Well, it's all these concepts that people have about God, but that kind of God doesn't exist. But we can think of God as the sum total of everything, or the environment.
About a minute or two ago, I thought of the Islamic perspective of God, and in a sense, there is a bit of a no-self thing going on there, where they say God is greater, than this or what's being presented to them, because since if their idea of I don't know, it's something to do with the unknown, and once it's known, then God has to be greater than that, because if this is the known, then the unknown is so great, like a void, infinite void.
Well, it depends upon how we define the word infinite. That in fact, even in the Buddhist scriptures, the word infinite is often or sometimes used, when in fact what we're actually talking about is boundless.
Boundless.
Right, that there are no boundaries there. So right now, what you're meaning by that would be that there is kind of a boundary between the known and the unknown.
Boundless is a word used a lot in Mahayana translations.
Exactly. There's a Pali word for it. So what we're saying then is that the boundaries keep moving out. The more we know, then we begin to, in fact, what we're looking at here is called the God of the gap.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, what is that gap? The gap is the gap of knowledge. That whatever we do know is not God, therefore the only thing that could be God is that which we don't know. But in the past several hundred years, that gap has gotten so small that it's more like a bookmark than it is a vast territory.
Yeah.
So, but in that case, we're still talking about meaning, that nothing means anything other than what an individual human can make out of it.
And in a sense, that kind of destroys the need for any argument. Actually, that's quite a tricky one, because you need the wise discernment, but in the sense of two people arguing, getting angry about something, when really they're both dancing around the same thing, but they can't see that it's actually the same thing.
My mother pointed that out to me and my dad a couple of times in my life. I remember that. You're talking about the same thing. And arguing. Okay, so there's another way of looking at that too, and that is that if someone actually knows, he knows something, perhaps has got absolute proof on the internet or whatever it is, and then you have someone who believes, who is more likely to get into an argument? The one who knows or the one who believes that he knows?
The one who knows, because the one who believes can be swayed more easily.
But that sway may take an argument. Okay, the one who knows, like the one who is strong, the one who is really strong doesn't want to fight.
Okay.
Okay, so the argument then is a fight, but the guy who really knows, he just says, well, okay, you go look it up.
Yeah.
He's not going to try to argue or convince, because most arguments that people have, they're not only trying to convince their interlocutor, they're trying to convince themselves, because they don't really know. A clear example of that is whose sport team is better. So you've got Manchester Guardian and you've got Liverpool, and the two guys that love each of those sport teams wind up in the same bar. They're going to have a huge argument over whose sport team is better, because neither one of them are absolutely sure that their team is better. Someone, in fact, who really knows doesn't even care about sports. He's not interested in which sport team is better. That's kind of an irrelevancy. And so he's not going to argue with either one of them about which sport team is better.
Yeah, but this is a tricky topic. If the one who knows then wouldn't actually state it, it's tricky. And I guess in Mahayana, that's the distinction between I can't remember what, private Buddha and
Paticca Buddha.
Yeah, Paticca Buddha and a fully enlightened Buddha.
In Theravada, Paticca Buddha is only a designation for a Buddha that doesn't teach.
Yeah.
And that there may be several different reasons for that. One of them is that he just doesn't have the skill of a teacher. Another one is he just doesn't have the interest to teach. Another one is he just doesn't have any students. That in fact, sometimes a Paticca Buddha will have a student and he will teach him, but he's not skilled at teaching because he hasn't done enough of it. Okay, so that's what the definition then of the Paticca Buddha is merely the ones who kind of live in seclusion. They live in a situation to where they're not likely to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And probably a good example of a Paticca Buddha would be like Gautama the Buddha, except that he just decided, because the Buddha did himself, he actually came to the conclusion, this is too profound, it's too subtle, it's not worth teaching. That was one of his original thoughts. So that's the thought of the Paticca Buddha. And then he says, I bet maybe one of my old teachers would be able to figure this out. And then he recognized, no, that teacher's dead. Then he said, well, maybe this teacher can figure it out. And then he said, no, he's dead too. And so then he had the idea, well, maybe the five friends that have been following me around for years, maybe they can figure it out. And for sure, one of them did. And so that's the story of the Dhammachakra Bhavanta Sutta, or the turning of the wheel of Dhamma. And so that's what then converted Gautama Buddha out of being a Paticca Buddha into a teaching Buddha. Many people who get some Dhamma, they really want to spread it. And so they decide that they're going to be a Dhamma teacher, and that becomes the most important thing. And so you wind up with a lot of Dhamma teachers in the West who decide that they're going to be Dhamma teachers and try to make a living off of it, to where monks already have their living worked out.
I see the problem there.
Yeah, sure do. But in Thailand and even in the West, when you have monks who have already got their entire livelihood straightened out, now they can teach the Dhamma in a more pure way. But still, they don't want to do it. If they see no advantage of making a living or anything out of teaching Dhamma, then they either have to do it completely out of compassion themselves, or another one that is quite common is that they're kind of encouraged or even pushed into it.
Yeah, I never thought about that, yeah.
That Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Achan Po, and now that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is dead and Achan Po is still alive, I still feel pushed into teaching the Dhamma by Achan Po. That's actually part of what makes it a lineage. Is that the higher ones in the lineage encourage his students to start teaching. But there's also an extra advantage going on, and that is once someone really understands the real value of the Dhamma, it's hard to get them to shut up about it. That's the only thing that they want to talk about.
Me, yeah, I've been there.
Okay.
Been there, done that.
With the push of your lineage, and also sometimes the training that you are put through. How they do that is by inviting the students to speak. Sometimes they're even tricked into it. I was tricked. The first time that I taught at Wat Suan Mok was because Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says, I want you to help me translate. And so he starts talking about the Four Noble Truths, and so I'm kind of, with his broken English, giving a fuller explanation about it. And then I go back to get the next line or whatever from him, and he says, you finish it. While I'm sitting in front of a whole lot of senior monks, a whole lot of Westerners, Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, Achan Po, the whole crowd is there, and I'm on the spot. Now I don't feel so much on the spot, but I do know now how to teach the Four Noble Truths. And so, but there was a time when I stopped teaching. After I disrobed in 2008, I didn't want to do any more teaching. I was kind of satisfied with the Dhamma the way that it was, but it was only then in 2000, I think it was 2011, that Achan Po put me back to work. And but it took a while because he says, "I want you to go to Chicago." No, I'm not going to Chicago. And then he says, "Well, Viradasa Viradamo, who was the head abbot at Chicago, is no longer in Chicago. He's in Phuket. Go to Phuket." No, I'm not going to go to Phuket. And so that's when Achan Po had the idea, okay, we're going to do it on the internet. And he specifically pointed out the supramundane Dhamma, rather than starting students off with ordinary or the religious Dhamma and then move them through that into the noble Dhamma. He, like Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, wants the real Dhamma, the supramundane Dhamma, right out.
Such a strange distinction. How you mentioned it with teaching children about Buddhism, and you start with the moral, the sila stuff, because it's quite easy for a child to grasp and understand. But the same with Christianity, how they teach all these stories, but the meaning isn't those stories.
That's another really good point that you're making. That oftentimes a story is told because there's a moral in that story or an actual point to it. We could go so far as to say a meaning, but I know that you start laughing at me if I say that there's a meaning to the story. Because if that's true,
language.
Well, exactly, except that in this case, the moral of the story may be multiple. That some students will see one part of the moral and another student will see another aspect of the moral. But mostly what happens is that nobody sees the moral of the story and dislike the story. An example is Aesop's fable of the tortoise and the hare. There's moral story, there's morality or moral for the hare and the tortoise. The moral for the tortoise is keep going, step by step, keep after it, one more step, one more breath, one more pedal or whatever, and that the rabbit has the moral to learn is if you think you're going to do something, go do it.
I didn't even think of how that could be related to the hare is the short breath and the tortoise is the long breath until you mentioned it there.
And so there's a really important Christian story that I should bring up in this regard because of the issue of the moral of the story. And that is the story of Adam and Eve. You know, the Christians, they really love that story out of Genesis. And then they get all wrapped up with talking snakes. Whose fault is it? Was it an apple? Why are they wearing fig leaves? And who threw them out of the Garden of Eden or out of paradise? Okay, so they're all wrapped up in this story. And the moral of the story, then, we can begin to inspect that by looking at, well, first off, what was it that Adam and Eve ate?
Well, I've read Buddhadasa, but
no, you know.
Yeah, it was fruit of the knowledge of good and evil.
The fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, in this regard, fruit is not the fruit of a tree; it's the fruit of or the result of an action. Okay, we use that in there's path and the fruit of the path, or there's action and the fruit of the action. The Pali, let's see, Kamma phala. The word phala is actually the fruit, but the fruit now means the result. So the result is what they ate. In other words, you have to put up with.
You are what you eat.
You are what you eat, or here in this case is that use it in the sense of humble pie. Okay, yeah. That if it's trying to be humble, then you're eating the humble pie, or you're eating the fruit of the results of the knowledge of good and evil. That means that we're putting meaning in stuff. We mean that it's evil or it's good. And our knowledge of what's good and what's bad, then we have to put up with that knowledge and the fruits that it brings. Now, what was the fruit that it brought to Adam and Eve? They got kicked out of paradise. Let me give you a very easy, quick example of that. Here I live in paradise. This tree here is part of paradise, except that I see a yellow leaf. Now I'm seeing one that's being eaten by a bug. Oh, there's a dead branch in that tree. That tree is not worthy of paradise. Let's rip it up and throw it out of paradise. Well, guess what? If I dig up enough trees and throw enough trees out of paradise, where's my paradise left?
Yeah.
Okay. So our choices about what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, means that we're out there chopping our own reality into pieces and saying that this is good and this is bad. And I try to avoid the bad and keep the good. And that's going to get us into a whole lot of trouble. In fact, that's the basis of religion.
I had to Google this because it's so good. But when I was learning German, this made me laugh. You are what you eat in German is man ist, was man ist. Man ist, was man ist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ist like essen, to eat. Really interesting language.
Mm-hmm. So we have to eat the results of our actions. This is what we mean by Kamma and Kamma Vipaka. But most people think that Kamma machine is a store and forward mechanism. What I mean by that is that you do an action now, but you're not receiving the benefit of that action. But you're supposed to be guaranteed that a good action is going to give you a good result. And a bad action is going to give you a bad result. But when I take an action, a bad action, and I get a good result, everybody gets confused. And so they say, well, that means then that eventually it'll happen. What they're saying is that if this old man robbed his village and then he died happily off of the product of his theft, then the Kamma machine is going to dig him up 300 years from now just to beat his ass. Okay? Now, really what's going on is all the people who got robbed by that man, they want to take their revenge.
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time on the internet. The mob mentality is crazy, and people naturally go for that. Like, oh, I can't believe he did that, and that punishment wasn't good enough, and really crazy stuff.
Exactly, right. So let's look at it like this, that almost always in our society, Kamma, whether it's a good action or a bad action, depends upon waiting for the result, checking the result to see if it was good or bad, and then that determines whether the action was good or bad. So if you invest on the stock market and the stock goes up and you sell it, then it was a good purchase. But if you buy a stock and it goes down and you have to sell it at a loss, then that purchase was bad. In other words, the purchase of the stock did not determine whether the purchase was good or bad. It was the result that determined the original was a good or bad action. Here's another example of that. On the sport field of whatever sport, in the stadium, the penalty flag goes off. The referee blows his whistle and throws a penalty flag. Was that penalty flag a good action or a bad action? Well, half the stand raises up and they cheer and say, "Yay, that was a good ride, a good call." And the other half of the stand goes up with their arms in the way and say, "Boo, bad call, bad call." All right, so was that original flag going? Was it a good call or a bad call? The answer is, in that case, who do you ask?
Yeah.
Or, in fact, in that regard, that action, in a way, was both a good action because it got a good result and a bad action because it got a bad result, both at the same time.
Can I ask? Sorry, could I link you? Maybe you've already seen it before. It's an interview with Richard Feynman, and an
Sure, share
interviewer.
the link.
Sure, an interviewer asks Richard Feynman, um, why are two magnets attracted together?
And the answer
And
is they're not.
yeah,
Depends
yeah.
upon the way you arrange them.
And he said that is the most ridiculous question. And he explains why using why is so ridiculous and absurd. It's a really, really good video of Richard Feynman.
Sure, I'd love to. I like those kinds of things. So you can send a link now or later. Let's get back to.
There's a full version, 1 hour long. I didn't know about that. I'll send you the short version, unless you want to see the long version.
Both.
Okay.
Okay. So we have actually now shown that there are three kinds of karma, three kinds of actions. One karma is good action gives good results. The second one is bad action gives bad results. But most action is mixed. It gives mixed results. And that kind of destroys the magical belief system in karma.
Because it's not one person or one thing or a core thing that determines its result. It's sankhara. It's compounded.
Right, exactly. So where is the meaning in all of this? The answer is it depends upon the observer manufacturing his own meaning. And so the the red team, they're all very happy with that, and the gray team is all unhappy about it. And so we break things up into winners and losers that way, but the action itself was merely mixed. The Buddha also talks about a fourth kind of action, and that is the kind of action that is neither good nor bad in the beginning, and it gives results. And those results are neither good nor bad, but they are liberating, and that it brings the end of karma. That's an important part, that a karma that brings to the end of karma. So let's examine that a bit. How can an action be neither good nor bad? Well, in this regard, if the student or practitioner is avoiding suffering, then he's not doing bad. But if his actions are expecting results that don't deliver, then he is expecting it to be a good thing that doesn't deliver. And so this is actually ordinary mind or ordinary karma. But and an example of that is doing good by merit making. Saibat, Tambun, you've heard these words, you've been in Thailand, okay? These are examples of people trying to do good actions in order to bring about a good result, but you don't see that good result. You're supposed to wait until your next life to get that result. The same thing happens with Western meditators. They sit down on the floor and practice their meditation, expecting that the Kamma machine will come waltzing in after a period of time, say 300 or maybe 3,000 or maybe 30,000. I don't know of anybody who's done 300,000 hours of meditation, but let's say after 3,000 hours of meditation, you expect a bit of result. And so here comes the Kamma machine waltzing into the Dhamma hall with his Shaktipat rag and blesses you, and now you're happy. This is what many meditators expect. They expect that the meditation that I'm doing itself is a good action and I should get good results.
Well, thinking about it, just the action of contacting the Sangha is the blessing.
Yes, now we're beginning to understand, oh no, wait a minute. And we'll put it like this. I think I mentioned to you this before. If your intention is to learn to play the piano, and you buy the piano books, and you and you hire a piano teacher, and then you spend your whole time playing the violin, is that going to help you learn to play the piano? Not much.
A
If
little
you're going to
bit.
learn, if you're going to learn to play the piano, you got to play the piano. You got to practice playing the piano. Okay. So in that regard, if you're sitting in meditation hall expecting results to come, they're not going to come because you're expecting them to come. They only come because you're practicing them to come. In other words, the only way to develop satisfaction is by practicing satisfaction, being satisfied right now, knowing
What's
that if
the sorry, my mistake. What's the Thai word for meditation again? It's something like the
samadhi.
oh, okay. And I can't remember the direct translation in English, but isn't it like to put in the effort or to put in the work or to do the work or to do the practice or something like that?
There's a lot of different ways of doing it because there's a lot of different people in Thailand. Okay, so there's more than one. But basically, what the word samadhi actually means is gathering together the factors, like a yurt. In fact, in the
Oh
sutras,
yeah,
they mention the idea of a yurt, of those ridgepoles. Another one would be an American Indian teepee with the ridgepoles, and they gather together at the top. That's the samadhi point. Okay, so with the first jhana, we have 5 factors that are needed, and when those 5 factors are collected together, samadhi, then we have the first jhana. Without the factors of it, that and this is kind of something really amazing, because the factors from first jhana to second jhana change, but that you can't just automatically go into second jhana without going through first jhana first. And so that applied and sustained thought that we're capable of doing in the first jhana melts away into silence in the second, which means now we cannot conceptualize, or in another way of saying it, we cannot make sense out of our experience. This is why the Buddha says that the second and third and fourth jhana are not actually liberating. It's the first jhana that's liberating, because we've got all the factors there collected together so that we can make sense out of our experience. So going back to this law of Kamma, or maybe it's not a law, maybe it's just a reality, this fourth kind of Kamma is a kind of Kamma that does not try to make merit, not trying to get good, not trying to get anything out of meditation, rather merely experiencing that which we have with it right now. So we develop satisfaction, and this satisfaction is enough right now. No need to expect something else, but we are developing skills, so we can see the progress that we're making, but we're continuing to practice the piano. And that piano practice is developing satisfaction. That's sukha, which is the opposite of dukkha. You know probably enough Thai to know that sukh and dukh are two words in the Thai language too, as well as in Pali. In fact, there's the old commercial. I don't know if you've heard it recently, but it was quite a joke, because it was a German. I think it was Carlsberg or Amstel. I don't know which one, but it was a foreign. But they knew enough Thai that they created this jingle then that is so funny, and that in Thai language is Kwam Suk Tikum Dum Dai. Have you
I know
ever heard
Kwam
that?
Suk is the emotion of happiness,
Yes.
and
And Drum Dum is a drink. Dai. Okay, so happiness is a beer that you can drink. And that's their slogan in Thai language. But the Thai people already know that, hey man, the happiness does not come from what you're drinking.
Yeah.
Happiness can be drunk. Happiness is something that the mind can do. It's a thing. So
Did you say doom in there?
yeah,
Okay, I didn't catch that.
yeah. Kwam Suk Tikum Doom Die,
Yeah.
which is actually Kruendom is a drink, but Doom is the act of drinking. Okay, so getting back to that point, then, that now we've got a kind of an action that is free from bad action because it's got no suffering built into it, but it also is free from good action in the sense that it's got no expectations. Very few of us can have that kind of action. You could think of it as altruism, that you give someone a gift knowing that the only value that you're going to get out of it is the joy of the giving of the gift. And so you give gifts that are going to be well received. But after you give that gift, you don't expect payback. It's not a loan, it's a gift. Okay, so basically then the kind of karma that is both not a bad action and not a good action then leaves us a result that's neither bad nor good. Why? Because now we're already in the mental state of not going along with Adam, not having to let us say, have to eat the fruit of our knowledge of good and evil, because we're no longer in that world of the knowledge of good and evil. So the Dhamma or the Arahat is then living his life so that he is living it in the moment without trying to plan for the future or trying to cause suffering. So his actions then are not going to produce bad actions because he's not putting in, or is not going to produce bad results because you're not putting in bad action. But here's how it brings the end of karma, is because almost always our karma is based upon wanting some result. And so if we get to the point with our satisfaction that we don't want any results, then that leads to not doing so much. And so when the Buddha talks about a karma or an action that leads to the end of action, that's where the Zen pick up on no place to go and nothing to do, and the spring comes and the grass grows by itself. Okay, so this is actually the four aspects or the four laws of karma, but most religions operate only with two, in the sense that if you do what you're told to do, that's good action and it'll give you good results. You'll get into heaven. And if you do bad action, which means you go against doing what you're told to do, then you're going to get punished for it. But that's a very low-class, ordinary mindset. That
There was a Buddhadasa quote that I read. Hell was great until some wise guy went to heaven and came back.
and advertised, huh? That sounds like something that he would say, yes. So today we have talked around a lot of stuff, mostly about sunyata and meaning of things, giving rise then to understanding exactly how the Buddha looked at karma. That our actions as a Dhammadut or as a meditator would be the kind of actions that bring us closer and closer to no longer having any actions. And so this is why we practice at understanding and knowing our feelings and our intentions so that we won't go into the kind of actions of grasping and clinging. So that fourth kind of karma that has no good that it's not good action and it's not a bad action means there's no clinging in it. Free from the clinging, which means also free from suffering, intentionally so. And this is the kind of Kamma that we want to practice, the kind of Kamma that leads to the end of Kamma, the kind of actions that we take as a meditator take us closer and closer to not doing much of anything at all. Because most of what we're doing is based upon the fact that we want something. And when we become satisfied, we don't go much. An easy example: group of guys go to the buffet, and they eat their fill. They pay their bill, they get back in the car, and they go back home. And along the way, one of the guys in the back says, "Oh, I see a Burger King. Let's stop and have some more food." And nobody in the car wants to stop. They've had it up to here. They're full of it. They don't want to have the action of Burger King now because they're full already. They're satisfied. They're satiated. Don't want any more. Thank you. Enough already. Okay, so that's a way of, in fact, the Thai word is polau.
Yeah, to sit, the word sit comes up so often in early modern literature, which is often seen as almost transcendental. You know, like Shakespeare, it's always talking about desires and to satisfy some kind of spiritual hunger.
Mm-hmm.
To sit.
Right, and that desire then, or if it is desire, if it is hunger, then it's not really spiritual. Real spirituality is being satisfied, not being hungry. And then, in fact, that kind of spiritual desire that you're talking about is what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa calls the spiritual disease. And he also calls it the prison of life, that we become prisoners to our own desires. Did I tell you about how they catch monkeys in Thailand?
No.
Okay, why would they want to catch monkeys? Well, because all of the coconuts that all of these trees around here and all over the island, there must be tens of thousands of coconut trees, and not one Thai man climbs a tree to get the coconuts. The monkeys do. In fact, the word for Thai in Thai is ling, and we normally translate that as monkey, to where these are actually apes. They're not monkeys. Why? Because their tail is only about that long and a tiny little one. Their butt shines red. Their head is big and their teeth are long and ferocious. These are baboons, a variety of baboon that we call monkey, but these are not monkeys. These are baboons, and they're smart. And they're trained. On both Koh Samui and in Surat Thani, they have university, Maha Vidyalaya Ling. They train these monkeys. They don't have to train them that much, but they do have to train them which coconuts to pick, which is kind of the monkeys already know, and then how to twist it. Once that twisting motion got going, that coconut is going to fall because you're breaking the fiber of the line that it's on. So that's what the monkeys do here. We have them in the yard often. How do they catch the monkeys? Well, they can catch them in captivity if a monkey is already in captivity, but they actually go after the ones in the wild. And here's how they do it. How did they get their first one? Is they take a coconut and they cut a hole in both ends. One's a little bit larger than the other. They run a rope through it with one end tied to the other, so that that tied end then holds that coconut in place. They tie the other end of the rope around a tree. And that's the whole trap. Just a coconut on a rope with a hole in it under a tree. The monkey comes by, he sees that fresh coconut. What does he do? He puts his hand right in there and he starts grabbing around to get some coconut. But when he tries to grow his hand out with that coconut
Has to
in
let
there,
go.
he can't get it out. But if he would turn the coconut loose, he could get his hand out, because that's how he got it in there. He had to force his hand in, but now that he's got a handful of coconut meat, he can't get the hand back out. That's brilliant when you think about it, because that's what we all do. In order to have freedom, all we have to do is let go. Just stop grasping and clinging, and we can get our hand out. So there's real Dhamma in there. The monkey is trapped, and when the minute comes, the monkey will go wild because he knows he's about to get caught and trapped. But will he let go of that handful of coconut meat? No, he just goes berserk while he is actually he is tied to that coconut through his own action.
Yeah. And then more work will follow.
Right now, exactly, because if he does not let go of that and escape the manhood, he's going to be taken to monkey school, and he's going to be on a lead for his whole life. Now, these leads are normally about 50 feet long, about 20 or 30 meters, which means that even if the monkey or the baboon can jump from tree to tree to tree and escape, no, he can't. He can't do that because the man's got him by the rope. And in fact, most of the instruction is done with that rope, of tugging it or moving it that way, go that direction, or moving it this way, go that direction. But if the monkey really wants to stay in that tree, the manhood, all he has to do is grab that rope and start pulling on it. And that monkey comes right out of that tree. So you're right. Not letting go at that one time is going to determine the whole life of that young monkey. I imagine that each one of us have had moments in our lives when we made that kind of decision, or that kind of, I want that car so bad. I'll do anything to get it, including steal it. And so that's how life goes. When we finally understand that fourth law of Kamma, coming from a state of satisfaction, our actions come to an end. The action of sticking your hand into that coconut, and then action of letting go and pulling it out, and now he's free again. So the actions are over until he sticks his hand in another coconut that's on a rope.
Because he's done it before.
But he might have figured out, because a lot of monkeys don't get caught because they figured it out. In fact, one of the techniques that they use is that they'll go scrape around like that, pull their hand back out, and then take the coconut and shake it, and the meat will come right back out because they've already scraped it off the side. So some monkeys are smart. We call them Dhamma dudes.
They have some kind of intuition.
Mm-hmm. But the dumb ones are the ones who get caught. And so that coconut on a string is a really, really, when I first heard that, I said, my goodness, that's not a monkey's story, that's humans. We're acting like monkeys all the time. We are grabbing a hold of something and we won't let it go, even when it is not in our good best interest to cling, to hang on. And so now we understand also there's one more point about the law of Kamma from the Buddha, that it's not a store and forward mechanism, that the results of our actions are almost always immediate. For instance, if you cut your hand with a knife, it does not take hours or days for it to start bleeding. It starts bleeding right away, immediately. If you're practicing meditation correctly, then you're getting the results immediately, right away. If you're not practicing correctly, then you're not getting results And it's natural for the mind to think, oh, well, the results will eventually come if I keep practicing. But you're practicing wrong. If you're practicing correctly, you're getting the benefit or the results right now. That's action and the result of action. For instance, if you eat an apple, then you get the benefit of the taste of the apple and the nourishment of the apple. If you eat poison, you're going to get poisoned. So eating poison, that's a bad action, giving bad result. And eating a good apple and getting the benefits of that is the good result. Building a temple is not a good action. If there is any result of it, then the guy who built the temple, now he can walk around the temple holding all his pride out, saying, well, I'm the big dude here because I had the money to build this temple. He might do that, but he originally thought that building the temple meant that after he died, he'd have a better life. But there's no guarantee of that. There's no guarantee that good action will give good results unless it's immediate. There's no real store and forward mechanism. In other words, you cannot store that result up and then deliver it later. It's either you're going to get it now or it's not going to be.
Were you aware of my link to the monkey hanger before you told the story of the monkey?
No.
I'm not sure if you have the comments open, but I linked the term monkey hanger. Yeah.
I saw the links come in, but I haven't fiddled with it.
Because it's been there the whole time for me, and I didn't really catch on until now.
Okay. Well, this has been an entertaining conversation. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I hope it has been of value to you too.
Thank you.
And we'll get back into a little more organized method, because we still need to talk more about Paticca Samuppada and how that fits into the second noble truth and that kind of thing to sort of round this out, as well as the various parts of the path as milestones that can be looked at. A really clear example is that most Westerners, there's a Reddit that has the word stream entry, and that I've seen it not recently, but when I look at it and see the guys who are talking about themselves being stream entry, they don't even know what it is. They're making all of that stuff up. But the Buddha's got it very, very specifically laid out in 7 distinct steps. And I think I've mentioned the first one to you before. And that first step of the noble path is, doesn't matter how obstructed the mind is, I can clean the mind out and come back to this present moment, regardless of the hindrances. Okay, so there can be some big doozies. I mean, you can get arrested by the police and be taken to the police station. For most people, as even Dhammadu's, is going to be a hindrance. It's really hard to make good friends with the arresting officers, or to brag about how marvelous their arrest was to the duty officer at the station house. That takes some, how to say it, it takes that level of knowledge that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, I do not have to go along with those obstructions. I can clean the mind out and be here now and do what I need to do to manage this situation correctly. I haven't tried it yet because I don't think I've ever, in fact, no, I've never been arrested, so I don't know how the arresting officers behave. But if you behave really, really well to them, they'll give you good treatment right then and there. If you argue with them, if you call them names, they'll treat you like that's what you've been doing. You make good friends with them, they'll be friendly back. If you treat them badly, they'll treat you badly, and that'll happen right then and there. That's not karma. That's just karma,
Yeah.
and the result right then. It's
I've seen lots of confrontation videos with the police and people like protecting their rights, and I think a lot of the conflict comes from just labeling the guys in the uniforms as policemen
Mhm.
or authority. You know.
Yes. Now, in the ordinary world, we would see this guy as a police in a blue costume, in a police uniform, doing police things. The real master, the Dhamma dude, only sees another human being.
Mm.
And so if you treat him like a policeman, he's going to behave like a cop, a police. If you treat him well, like he's a good friend, like a human being, he'll behave like that. It's only natural. But that's hard for us to see. Oh, because if I'm getting arrested, my mind is generally obstructed. What are you doing? Go away. Leave me alone. I didn't do anything wrong to you, that kind of thing. What kind of cop are you to arrest me? Is the kind of thoughts that people normally have. But when we have that first step of the noble path, that means that it doesn't matter what it is. I can take care of this correctly.
Do you have any tips for cockroaches? I think my bathroom is currently has a bit of an infestation problem.
I tell you what, if I can convince one of them, I've got a couple of big geckos here at the house, and I
Have
know
to get
that
a new
they
pet.
really love cockroaches.
Yeah. Just that my bathroom's ecosystem is out of balance.
Well, do you have geckos?
No,
Toucans?
no, they don't get in.
Why not?
Um, I don't know. I think you should leave the what do you call it, balcony door open.
Yes, or leave a light. In fact, the geckos come to the light at night. Why? Why do the geckos come to the light?
So they can see their prey.
No, it's because that's where all
Oh,
the
because the
insects
insects are
are.
attracted to the light. My mistake.
Right. So
Yeah,
you could
they
try to.
probably have some kind of night vision going on.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you invite a gecko in: is leave the door open and a light on.
Then I have to deal with mosquitoes.
Oh well, I didn't give you a perfect answer. I just gave you one that worked.
Yeah. I have a hard time trying to deal with mosquitoes. Comes combined with a childhood needle phobia.
I've been in Thailand for many, many years, and so I would say that to recommend the way that I deal with mosquitoes may be a little bit beyond what you're ready for. But normally, I wait until the mosquitoes attack, and I can tell that they're attacking because either I can see them biting or I can feel it. But once the mosquitoes start biting, that's when we put on a coil.
Coil? You mean like the
Coil.
repellent?
Mmm. Tesco. Coil.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what this is?
No.
It's a mosquito coil. They don't like to smoke.
What do you do with it?
You set it on fire.
Is it safe for indoors?
Well, I've been burning them, sitting beside them for many, many years now, and I'm still breathing. Let me see if I can get this thing started. Don't even need it now because the mosquitoes are not out. Sometimes the mosquitoes don't come at all.
Is
And
it
so we don't
repellent?
even, it's just smoke. I think it's what this is it's manufactured, stuck together cow dung.
Hmm.
There. So we light it up like that, and it smokes until there's quite a breeze going on right now. And that's the mosquito repellent. You put it close to the floor, and then it's just smoky all over the place. In fact, here on the porch, the mosquito coil is so good that the mosquitoes don't even go in the house. and the door is good 4 or 5 feet from here. So they don't avoid the coil and then go in the house and attack the people. They don't even want to come onto the porch when the mosquito coil is going.
When I was on retreat, I kind of went from a level of catching every mosquito I could find in my kuti and putting it outside. I went from that to just sitting and waiting for them to bite me and feeling the pain and noting the pain and, and seeing how it fades and its impermanence and my reaction to it. But it's still quite tough. It's still quite tough to deal with it that way.
Mosquito netting has been used for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. Mosquito netting was quite effective in eliminating malaria, even in North Thailand. There was a time during the Vietnamese War when the refugees were coming from Cambodia, bringing malaria with them, where Thailand didn't have much of an issue. And then they got up into Chiang Mai because a busload of or more, they would bus them from the refugee camps at the border throughout Thailand, and that's what spread malaria throughout Thailand. That happened in 1978, that period of time up into the 80s. So there was a malaria outbreak in Thailand, but we don't have a problem now because everyone was using mosquito netting.
Well, that's the thing. They don't come in here because if I go out to the balcony, I open the door, I walk through, and I shut the door.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I have no geckos.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing it very Western, rather than getting mosquito coil or mosquito netting. And about the way that the monks' umbrellas are made?
No.
Okay, they're made so that when it's made in a circle, it's all mosquito netting. But when you open the mosquito net, some of them have the netting sewn around the outside of the umbrella, or that you just merely put this thing around the umbrella so that if you've got no trees around, then the post that the umbrella is on will hold the umbrella up. But mostly the monks will tie the top part of the umbrella to a tree limb so that the underside of the umbrella is completely free for sleeping or sitting or whatever right in the middle without that pole. But the important point that I'm making is that the mosquito netting is the umbrella is merely a support for the walls of their tent, and the walls of the tent is mosquito netting, and that's been used for many, many centuries with the monks out in so the question is, well, how do the monks deal with mosquitoes when they're right out there in the forest? The answer is they carry the mosquito netting with them in their umbrella. And so mosquito netting, that's the thing. And by the way, back to the issue of malaria, who do you want to put under the mosquito net is not everyone, only the people who have malaria. Because where do you think the local mosquitoes are going to get the malaria? They're going to get it from sick people who have the malaria. So if you can isolate them from the mosquitoes won't transmit malaria widespread. And so that's the way that they handle malaria in Thailand. It's both in the old days and also in the late 70s, it was an issue. But it's not an issue now because of mosquito netting. But the mosquitoes, they're there. And the Thai people know it. And they deal with the mosquitoes. But I would say probably in very modern Thailand, with the kind of modern building that you live in, that you can keep it out. But this old wooden house that we're living in here now, literally every board is an entryway that the geckos are all over the place. That we've got really, really big ones. We've got two big tubes that are right here in the roofing. We've got another one that I know that he's a really big one that lives in the tree not far from here. And he seems to be the guy that runs the show. He's the one that's a tok, 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 he's that guy. But the bathrooms has got 4 or 5 of the smaller ones that are about this long. So we've got tons of geckos around here, and that's part of the reason we don't have much of a mosquito problem.
Yeah, it's good.
Get yourself a gecko. Your mosquito problems will go away.
I just have to invite him in.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know them. You probably have that sound that I made. You probably heard that in Thailand before.
Yeah,
That's
many times. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So that's the guy you want to come bring into the house. Then you won't have any mosquitoes at all. Then you can leave your door open all the time. No worry.
Okay.
Even some of the windows here have no screening. The kitchen windows got no screening. It's one of those old style windows that open like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's no possibility for us to try to guard to keep animals out of the house. We just have that balance. And the geckos, we've got dozens, well, maybe not dozens of them, but probably 8 or 10.
Well, some of the kids at my school, when they'd have bites all over their legs, like over every like square inch of their legs. It's crazy. I don't know how, but somehow, I don't know why. It's just, I think it's mosquito bites. Maybe some kids are just really prone to the swelling or something. Maybe they just live.
They may need,
mosquitoes.
if you know one kid that's got it a lot, you might want to see if you can get him medical attention. That, of course, you can't do now, but when the coronavirus issue comes to an end in Thailand, there are kids who need medical help that don't get it, even though there is a national health system in Thailand. So that may be the issue. We don't know, because you're just telling me a story and you don't know whether it's mosquitoes or what it is.
But it looks, I thought it was mosquitoes just upon a glance.
Not likely. Not likely, because I'm sitting right out here on the porch and I do this all, many, many hours throughout the day.
Well, I thought it might just be to do with kids and how they're something to do with their immune systems being young or something.
Well, let me say this to at least finish the story. When I first came to Thailand or to India, I was miserable with the mosquitoes. So it's something that I've gotten kind of used to. But I don't see the mosquito bite as a tragedy. I see it as a notice, time to put on a coil. And so if the mosquitoes don't bite, I don't put a coil on. And so that's something happens over time, and I think that it's all mental, in the sense that the mosquito bite had exactly the same effect 40 years ago on the skin that it does now. But it's the mind that's different. Mosquito bite is a mosquito bite. And if you're not mindful, you start scratching it. But if you are mindful, you don't. And if you scratch it, you make it worse. And if you don't scratch it, then it'll go away fairly quickly, within 3, 4, 5 minutes. And so that's the way that most people in Thailand deal with them. So this kid that you've got that's got something going on with his skin, it's probably not mosquitoes. Because a mosquito bite does not last a long time. But if you see this kid and he's got this stuff all over his legs, it's not because of new mosquito bites by the tens of thousands. It's probably something else.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'll be able to see kids in school for a while now, until July, I think it is.
Right.
Yeah. The online teaching today was fun, though. I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, let's finish off now, and we'll talk about all kinds of things, Thai culture, Dhamma, and whatnot next time you call.
Okay.
This has been an interesting talk. Sometimes you don't know where their talks are going to go, but we've gotten some Dhamma in here. In fact, some really good Dhamma. The 4 kinds of Kamma was a good topic, and also talking about meaning. That if there is no self anywhere, then how can anything have any meaning to it? There's no meaning to anything. All meaning is made up. So when people ask what's the meaning of life, the answer is, well, make something up quick.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll see you,
Okay.
Mark.
Goodbye, Dhammarato. Bye bye.
Okay.
See you next
Bye-bye.
time.
Yes. See you soon.